Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. I am your host, Alex Greenwood. Thanks for checking us out. Here we are again, episode... Oh my goodness, what episode are we on now? It seems like forever since we last spoke, although I know that the last time we spoke about the unfortunate hurricane damage that was being done to the setting of many a John Pilot story and book, Key West, and the adjoining environs. We talked about that quite a bit. That was episode 29, and well, here's episode 30. I'm so excited, and in just a moment, we've got a great guest. We've known him to grace us with his presence and humor and great insights about writing many a time. Jason McIntyre will be joining us shortly. I wanted to do a couple of house cleaning things while we were getting started here. First thing, I know at the end of that last episode, chapter 29 as I call it, that I had mentioned that we would talk about the F word on the next episode. And we're not going to talk about the F word. The F word being failure. We're going to talk about how failure has actually encouraged and inspired me to go on as a writer and in many other aspects of my life, because frankly, I failed way more than I've succeeded. But, you know, it's not going to be a downer. We're going to do that one. It's going to be, I think, a good look into the ways that creative failures can create some pretty spectacular results when you pick yourself up and keep moving. In fact, we might even ask our guest a little bit about his greatest failure. Maybe he'll think about that while we're talking. Again, don't forget, you can follow me, Alex Greenwood, J. Alexander Greenwood, the pen name, but you can call me Alex on Twitter at @A_Greenwood. And don't forget the John Pilot Mysteries Facebook page. Just look for John Pilot. That's Pilate Mysteries on Facebook. And the mothership, Mysterious Goings On, is actually at pilotscross.com. That's pilatescross.com. And you'll find our blog and our store. If you want autographed John Pilot merch, you can order it right there at a low, low price. Holidays are upon us almost. It's almost Halloween time, as a matter of fact. So you want to get some autographed books to give to grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles. Just give it to somebody you love. Well, then again, if you don't love them, maybe it's a good idea. I don't know. So I'm hearing something, and I think it's got to be our guest, Jason McIntyre. Well, come in.
Hi, did you order a pizza?
I did. Does it have Canadian bacon?
Of course. That's all I bring is Canadian bacon and maple syrup. I don't put the maple syrup on the pizza, though. People don't like that.
Jason McIntyre, welcome back to Mysterious Goings On.
Why, thank you. I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, just to let everybody know a little bit about you. You're the #1 Kindle suspense author, ranked #1 for the Night Walk Men. You've had bestsellers on The Gathering Storm and Shed, plus the multi-layered literary suspense of Phthalo Blue. Your short fiction has appeared in numerous magazines and won several awards. But again, his debut novel On the Gathering Storm is cited by readers as a, quote, uncomfortably thrilling, unquote, read, and it's earned McIntyre a spot in the top 20 debut authors for the Goodreads Choice Awards. Dag, man.
That's a very fine introduction. I appreciate that, and I think I have to stuff my head back into this little spot here.
It's almost as if you'd written it yourself. But you can find more about Jason, by the way, at thefarthestreaches.com. I know Jason doesn't update that every day, but there's plenty of great info about Jason and all his work, and also his graphic design work and some other stuff, some really good stuff. So Jason, okay, all that out of the way, welcome back. Hey, how you been, buddy? Doing okay?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to put books out. Many, many, many books. More books than people want to read, apparently. Hopefully kidding. I've been very busy as you have, fighting the good fight, writing the good word. Some of them better than others, you know.
Actually, as we record this session, you are just days away from the release of your latest novel, Unwed, correct?
Correct. Unwed comes out on Friday, October the 27th. It's available for pre-order now at a discounted price of 99 cents. Cheaper than coffee, I think.
Good gravy. That's a bargain at 5 times the price.
Depending on how good your coffee is, it's a pretty decent price for a shorter novel. It's not a 500-pager, but probably be 180 to 200 pages in print form. It's available in ebook format only. It's exclusively at Amazon to start with. There will be a print version later. Unwed is kind of a unique way to present a book. It's a part of a mosaic novel. Currently, there's 8 titles available in this larger mosaic work. Each book of the 8 has their own main characters and their own plot line, their own beginning, middle, and end. You can read 1 book, you can read 2 books, you can read 3 books. You'll get 3 complete stories if you read 3 books. You don't have to read them in order. You don't have to start at the beginning. Unwed, which comes out Friday, October the 27th, is the 6th book chronologically. But that doesn't matter. You don't have to read the first 5 because they all have different stories and different characters that feed into a larger mosaic of what's happening in this particular setting with this large cast of characters.
Well, when you mention the setting, it's Dovetail Cove. What is Dovetail Cove? Can you give us a little background on what it is, where it is, how it is, and when it is?
Dovetail Cove was a thriving town in the 50s and 60s, a tourist place on a small island. And it's much like your own neighborhood or the town where you grew up. There's gossipers. There's way too many churches for the number of people that live there. The population swells with tourist activity. When we catch up with it, it's the 1970s, and it's suffering kind of an economic meltdown. The power plant has gone out of business. The mine has shut down. Workers are leaving. The main economy is probably fishing and lobster and that kind of thing. So we have an interesting mix of well-to-do folks and those that are kind of on the lower spectrum, close to poverty. So it offers a great chance to kind of visit all the different aspects, society in a microcosm, if that's okay. And it's interesting because while the fictional town and the island is technically Canadian, it's populated as well with lots of Americans, and the overriding genre is kind of Americana, if I may, like a gothic horror literature kind of a feel for the town and these stories.
I've read numerous pieces of the puzzle of this mosaic. I've read several of the Dovetail Cove novels, including I received a artist proof, it's not an artist proof, but I received a proof manuscript of Unwed, which, wow, we'll get to that in a moment. But it's interesting. When I first went into this, just reading a little bit about them, I thought, well, whoa, is this like a kind of a Twin Peaks kind of thing, this place? But I guess you can make some of those kinds of comparisons, but frankly, my major criticism of Twin Peaks, I love the atmosphere, but I think the stories are kind of weird for weird's sake a lot of the time, and that's not what you find here in Dovetail Cove. And what I love too about is the clever punnage going on with Dovetail Cove. All the books dovetail into one another. I'm sure that wasn't intentional, but I love that, and I love the aesthetic, the visual aesthetic that the words evoke within me. I love the way you can see these characters, and I think you hit it on the head when you said that aspiring to kind of capturing these snapshots of Americana type settings, and you fully inhabit a lot of these characters in such a way that even though you don't go overboard on describing how they look, in fact, you rarely go into appearances at all, but just their dialogue and their thought process and their actions, they instantly plug in a lot of the time for me into these archetypes that I actually know from real life, having lived in small towns. It's very successful in that way because the reader doesn't have to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to figure out who these people are. You can just get into the story. You get in there, and it's really superb in that regard. It's clear that you've put a lot of work into the characters.
Well, thank you. That is my hope. And to be honest, this idea of archetype characters appeals to me. I like looking at everyday life that you and I and many people take for granted in a way, and then kind of breaking those archetypes or breaking those stereotypes down and looking at the layers underneath the surface of the onion, not just with the characters, but with the setting and the plot itself. A lot of times my goal is take something fairly mundane and really look at it underneath and see why it's more interesting, or turn it upside down and make it more upsetting. So right. In Unwed, we open with Bexy McLeod, who has 3 grown children that have left the island. 2 of them, the 2 boys, have gone off to become lobster fishers, and the daughter has had her own traumatic experience, and she's now left her mother behind. Bexy's in a wheelchair, and Bexy, we don't know exactly why yet, but Bexy's returning to her church, her former Catholic church, and we don't know why, but she hasn't been back in at least 4 years, possibly longer. And to me, that's interesting. Going to church is a very mundane activity for many people of different faiths. They go every Sunday. Why now would we be interested in Bexy's situation that she hasn't been, or hasn't felt that she's been welcome? So to me, that's, on the surface, that's a fairly mundane beginning. But my hope is that readers will quickly be asking, well, why hasn't she been? And that's very much at the center of Unwed. Why hasn't she been to church, and what is now going to go on now that she's back in that church in Dovetail Cove?
Yeah, and what I like too about the series, such as, I mean, it's weird to call it a series because it's really not sequential, but it is a series in that it takes, for simplicity's sake, we'll call it a series. How about that? I mean, you've even,
sure.
Right?
I call it the series that's not a series, because readers want series, they like series, they understand what that is. This one is different, but for the purposes of maybe selling it or appealing to those that love series, I've kind of pushed it into that mold a little bit by sequentially numbering them. Initially, there was going to be no sequential numbering whatsoever.
Right.
But I found that readers, they wanted a starting point, some of them. Others have jumped in and read along as I've released them out of order because, as one reader says, I'm devious.
you really are. I try not to play favorites in the books. I've read many of them. I haven't read them all. Looking back and thinking, I've read Bled and Redhead and Zed and Unwed and Shed.
You've read most of them.
I think. Wow. Oh my gosh. I think I have. I've read. I think the only one I haven't read is Fled, I guess.
I think so, and you've read Dread as well.
Have I read them all? There's no way.
You've read them all except for Fled. Yes, sir, you have.
That's it. Yeah, Fled's the one I haven't read.
Or you're a really convincing liar.
Well, no, I definitely have. But here's the thing. You may have noticed a theme here. The titles all have the Ed sound in them.
Yes, and there is not a single book called Ed, and there is not a single book called Ted. But I don't recuse myself from the responsibility of possibly having some rhyming characters in there eventually.
That I think that would be only natural. They're great too in the sense that they're not all the same. If we're going to take this into what genre are these books? Well, I hate to break it to you folks, but each book is a different genre basically. I mean, they're linked together, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm being a little too on the nose about that.
No, you're right, spot on, and that's good. Out of 8 books, and there's going to be a 9th and a 10th. It was kind of designed, for lack of a better word, not that I really design what I'm going to write, but in my mind as I was going through it and discovering how I could tell this bigger story, and I came up with this idea of writing them in smaller pieces. It kind of became a bit of a playground for me, for lack of a better word. I wanted to write a bunch of different kinds of genres before I kicked the can. And this model that I kind of came up with afforded me the opportunity to do that. So, I mean, we have, just glancing here at the list, we have a fairy tale, we have a psychological suspense, we have a noir kind of crime drama, we have what I would loosely call a romance. Unwed is kind of a soap opera. It has those elements to it. We have kind of a classic damaged hero horror story, and we have what I sometimes call a murder mystery in reverse. Now, they're all my style. They don't break from my style very much, but they do borrow from some of these genres quite heavily in their structure, in their language, and in what they're really about. And for me, that was just a tremendous ton of fun to be able to jump from genre to genre while still retaining, the suspense and the horror and suspense, horror, suspense, and thriller elements that everybody kind of expects. Those are all pretty much present in everything.
Right, but what I love about it too is, in particular, if you're new to the series now, you have 8 books now. You can dive in. I've been reading them kind of as they went along, so there was spaces between, each book. Whereas you can read each piece of the mosaic and put it together if you were to read them all. Not when I say sequentially, I mean pick any way you want, but you could go get all 8 books right now, and
That's a good point. With the release of Unwed on Friday, the 27th of October, the first 8 books, if we're looking at them chronologically, the first 8 books will then be available. So if you wanted to read them in chronological order, they start in 1971, 72, 73, 74, up to 1978. Each book happens in its own year. So we can even look at it that way. But again, you don't have to go that route. You can pick any one that appeals to you. And start there, and if you enjoy it, pick up another one, because you'll get a bigger story. You'll get more clues as to what the heck is going on here.
Right.
And then the 10th book is going to pull a lot of these favorite characters back that readers over the last, 5-6 years since I've been publishing this series. It's not a series. The readers have told me, I like this character. This character better not die. Please don't kill off so-and-so. Many of those characters, some of them did die. Sorry. But many of those characters that are still with us will be back for that 10th book. And some of them that did die, they might actually reappear as well. So, stay tuned for that.
That's so cool. There is so much to recommend these books, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention also the very vivid covers, the cover art, which I believe did you do all of them?
I've done all of them, yes. It's one of the things I do for other authors as well. I design both jackets, both print and ebook. I also do advertising, graphic design for social media and print if that's a need. Yeah, if people listening to this now wanted to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to help you out with graphic design for your book. I tend to do, slightly unusual designs. I try not to follow the tropes, not just with my writing, but with the things I design. I want to create something that stands out on the shelf for authors and their readers. So yes, and I've done all of Dovetail covers as well. Yeah.
If you go to Amazon.com, and the link's in the show notes, by the way, to the pre-order for Unwed, and you can go from there. You click on Jason's name, and you can go find the series. And by the way, if you hear some noises, we're having some work done here at Stately Wayne Manor, so I apologize ahead of time. I'm hearing the workers. They're starting to install some countertops, which makes me excited. All right, anyway, if you want to go to Amazon, go to those links. You can see these very vivid covers. I'm not going to say which of these books is my favorite, but I will tell you I have a favorite cover.
Oh, okay. Which one?
I absolutely love Redhead.
Yeah, it's a very powerful cover. In my opinion,
yeah.
As a designer, I felt like I really hit on something with that design.
Well, it captures a noir feel, and there's some menace and some sex, but it's just, I don't know how. If you're new to Jason's work, I'll just tell you, they don't leave you very quickly. Now, that's a compliment to a writer, but honestly, it's like when you see a movie and you wake up the next morning and you're still kind of thinking about it, or you read a book and it's still with you a few days later. That's, to me, the hallmark of something that it may have disturbed you. And I'm not going to lie, some of Jason's stuff really disturbs me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's meant to be disturbing. But it's funny because he's been a guest in my home, and I really care about him very much as a friend. And he's got this phenomenal reservoir of darkness that he can tap into, and I get a little disturbed when I read some of the stuff he does. But these covers are gorgeous, and I don't know why you don't enter them in contests, because they're fantastic and you would win every time. They're just so great.
Well, thank you for saying that. Now it makes me wonder, as a guest in your home, how did you sleep at night knowing that this creep was, in the guest room?
We locked the door.
Yeah, I bet. I heard the click.
Yeah.
I thought you were locking me in, and maybe you were just locking me out of the rest of the house. I don't know.
I contemplated locking you in. I know that, but no, it's quite a it's quite a imagination, a subconscious, whatever it is that you can draw upon. It really is.
I appreciate that. I should probably mention at this point, some readers I find take what you said just now to mean that there's a lot of adult subject matter. There are mature themes
Mm-hmm.
in some of the books. Some of those mature themes drive the plot, drive the characters. I don't have a lot of profanity
No.
in my work. There's some, because I think there's a natural way that we speak in the 1970s, the 80s, the 90s, and up until now. There's, it's just the way some of these characters speak, that they use four-letter words, etc. But it's not an overabundance, I don't think.
No.
And there's not an overabundance of graphic violence
No.
or graphic sex. There are those things to a degree. One of the things that I strive for is I don't really want to be a gore meister. I don't want to have blood on the walls, for what I'm writing. I don't necessarily need to have so much flesh and sexual tantalization in what I write. I think often less is more. Not to say I don't want to describe the scene fully and the important aspects of things. I just don't think I would be served, and I don't think the story would be served in these books with gratuitous sex, violence, profanity, and that's just the way that I do it. So yeah, that's just something worth mentioning, I think.
Well, to be clear, when I say I've been disturbed, and that's the thing too. I'm clearly not being disturbed by a gratuitous gore fest or a raunchy sex scene. I mean, there's, like you said, there's plenty of nuance there, and there's plenty of things that bring it to mind. But that's the thing. You give us as a reader the ability to formulate our own horrific visions and our own, how an explicit sex scene might look, because it looks different to every reader. And ostensibly you're going to be, with the prompts, so to speak, from Jason's work, you're going to be creating imagery of a raunchy sex scene or of violence or gore that speaks to you. Jason, you leave it to the reader, which is great. So when I say disturbed, though, you push those buttons quite well, because yet without all those things spelled out for you, I still carry the story around with me, days after I've read it. That's the same thing when with your book of short stories, which I believe you're going to let us know a little bit about that too. But I've read some of your short stories, and oh my goodness, I carried some of those around with me. And I'm not the first person to say this, but I totally believe this. It's a pity there's no Twilight Zone on anymore. I just think you'd be excellent. You'd be an excellent writer, if not showrunner, of the Twilight Zone, because you really do nail so many things with your work. You really do. Great storytelling.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's my hope, is that I'm using an efficiency of words to hopefully invoke, or evoke, I guess is the word, evoke in a reader some sort of response. Somebody said that one book was guttural or visceral. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot in indie publishing and big name publishing. Visceral.
Yeah.
I actually, my hope is to actually write visceral work that actually punches people in the gut without necessarily ripping open a gut, if you know what I mean. I don't necessarily need a reader to visualize or see blood and guts to think about heavy repercussions, physical repercussions, mental repercussions. And I love when a reader says exactly what you said. So I appreciate that a book stayed with me, even though it wasn't, like I've said, gore and extreme fiction in that way. I like to do the extreme part of the fiction in the reader's head. That's my hope. And if I'm succeeding at that, then I'm firing on all cylinders if I can do that.
I think you truly are. It's always exciting to know that there's another Dovetail Cove book on the way, and I'm a little nervous now that I know there's only 2 left.
Well, that's interesting. So 1979, which is the last year of this decade of the 70s and the last year of the decade of the Dovetail Cove books, has another book, and my hope is to put that out in November, December. I usually don't advertise dates, because if I don't make them, I don't want to set anybody up for expectation and then fail to meet it. I'm fairly certain that the 9th book, 1979, which has a title but it's not revealed yet, will be out November or December. The 10th book is a giant book. It is the longest thing I've ever written, because it pulls in all of these characters. So yeah, it will be the final Dovetail Cove book, but it's going to be, I'm hoping, as long as all the other 8 or 9 books combined, almost as long.
Good
Uh,
Lord.
it's going to take some time to get, final, the final draft and final edits and that kind of thing ready. So I can't say for sure when. My hope is early next year for that book. But fans, I don't really like that word, but readers of the series to date who've enjoyed it, some of their favorites will be back, and I'm hoping they will not be disappointed by the massive conclusion to this story.
No, I think that people, if you've read, particularly if you've read all of the preceding books, that last book is going to be a whopper that you're just ready to do it. I'm excited too because I've not. You typically write novellas or shorter novels, as you said, or short stories. So I'm really interested to see this really this epic book that you've come up with. And so is it all done? Are you basically, or is the series done? I mean, is it done? I don't mean is it all published? Obviously, it's not. But is it all done?
It's done, yeah. I've written the end on the 10th and last book of Dovetail Cove. Some of the 10 are novels, full-length novels. They're a little shorter than say a Stephen King work or something. It tends to
Right.
write long books. Um, but yeah, within this world, many of them are considered a novella, which is less than 50,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
For some readers, they're not going to know what that means. That would be less than 150 pages, maybe.
Yeah.
Considered a novella. So yeah, and then the 10th, yeah, it's ginormous and it's finished. It's got to go through the process of publication, though, right? Which, as you know, Alex, includes proofing. Well, before all of that, editing, extensive editing, beta reading, which is where where an author or writer will send out preview copies to a group of trusted confidants and readers and whatnot. Uh, Alex just put up his hand. I would love it if you pre-read the book, Alex.
I want to.
Find all my mistakes. That's the other thing that's tricky. I'm writing about a decade that I barely know, right? I was born into the decade of the 70s, but I have no conscious memory of the 70s. So there is a ton of research that goes into this. There's things that I've gotten wrong that beta readers have corrected. Rotary telephones and different technological advancements, songs that weren't actually released yet. Those kinds of things can be looked at quickly, but there's a kind of a gut memory that people who lived through a time have that somebody who didn't can't always get right. So I count on beta readers to help me with some of those things because some of them are older than I am, and I'm not poking anybody in this room, but I've had just a tremendous time playing in this era of the 70s. It was a simpler time. No smartphones. That's a huge challenge with writing
Tell me about it.
mystery fiction in 2017 is the smartphone. You can find out anything on a smartphone in your pocket. How can you write suspenseful stuff without, if books didn't have suspension of disbelief now in 2017, they'd only be 5 pages long because people would just, call up the other character and say, well, the killer's on his way. But of course, in 1976, you can't do that as easily. So there's a bit of more leeway, I find.
I think I've spoken previously about that in my John Pilot mystery series. A lot of it takes place in Cross Township, which has had a devil of a time getting good cell service. That's because it takes place within the last 10 years. So, but I've cheated quite a bit. And my next John Pilot novel, there's basically the smartphone is starting to come into I can't hold it off forever. I've just tried to cheat and not use it because he's either out on a boat where there's no service or he's back in a small town that has piss poor service. But yeah, the challenges of your research, it's really good because I love the way there's just the perfect detail to give it the verisimilitude the story requires, so that everything from what's on television, to, I'm making this part up, TV dinners or whatever, little details like that give it just that oomph, But you're right, it is challenging. And as I go forward in my series, which for some dumb reason I said, but there's going to be 12 of these damn things, and I'm only on I'm on
You
book.
did say that?
I did. Oh, I've announced that many times. There'll be a
Oh,
dozen. I've given interviews. Yeah, and I'm on book 6 right now. It may take the rest of my life, but I will get them done. Unlike you, I'm not as prolific, and I don't write as quickly. And I've always admired that about you. Is not only do you write quickly, but you write extremely well. It's exciting, and I wanted to make sure that as we wrap up here, that I told the listeners of Mysterious Goings On about what's going on with you. I could talk to you forever, but I know we don't want to wear people out, and you've got stuff to do. You've got a book to get out, but is there a couple of things you want to remind folks about? And
well, as I said off the top, and maybe perhaps you said it, the latest Dovetail Cove book drops on Friday, October 27th. Up until then, I think there's about 3 or 4 days between when we're recording this until Friday the 27th. The pre-order for that book, which is Unwed, a Dovetail Cove novel, 1976, is available. The pre-order at Amazon.com exclusively. And the pre-order for the ebook is at only 99 cents. And that's a steal because you can get bad coffee for just a little bit less than that. Or you can get this book for, a few pennies more and be entertained for at least the 2 hours that it would take you to read it. I'm really proud of the book. It's a bit edgy. There's some mature themes and subject matter in it, as are some of the other books. But I'm really happy that this rounds out the first 8 books in this series. If people want to learn more about the series, they can go to my website, which is www.thefarthestreaches.com. I don't know. You always spell your website, Alex. I don't know if I should try it. TheFarthestreaches.com. Wow, that's a really long URL.
I wouldn't do that very often if I were you.
No,
You did it
no,
well.
I think that's the first time I've ever done it, and I didn't read it,
Well, I
which
do.
is amazing.
I spell mine because pilot. Everybody thinks it's Pilates or pilot, like
Or
an airplane
pilot
pilot.
of an air.
So I have
Yeah.
to spell it. Yeah, and yeah. So go to the farthest reaches. The link will be in the show notes too. You know what I'm going to do though, real quick before, and also if they want to get a hold of you, if you're an author and you're interested in a fantastic book cover, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, my phone number is no, I'm kidding. Again, you can go to the Farthest Reaches. I have a page on there called Graphic Design. You can click on that, and that will allow you to send me an email. If you don't want to do that and you're on Facebook, I'm at Jason McIntyre on Facebook. Also, Twitter, it's Jason C. McIntyre on Twitter. You can ping me in any of those places, and I will respond to you and help you out with that. Or tell you a great spinach dip recipe. I'm really, really proud of my spinach dip recipe.
Well, I'm looking forward to having that, and I'm gonna have to mention too that folks, I put my money where my mouth is. The next book in the John Pilot series coming out very shortly was created by Jason McIntyre, and I think you're gonna love it. It's really exciting and fun, and captures the book. Yeah, it's explosive. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Ooh, nice tease.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with this about Unwed. It's January 1976, and Bexley McLeod gets roped into helping Dovetail Cove's retired doc as he deals with St. Dominic's latest problem. Having tangled with the town's church-going community for years, Bexley knows she shouldn't get involved. Wheelchair-bound after an accident left her paraplegic, she might be the least sensible choice. Trouble tends to follow the widow, and the last thing Bexley needs is confrontation. But now she's finding herself enamored with the young woman she's helping. Bexley may just have to go toe-to-toe with one of the most prominent members of Dovetail Cove's upper crust, and its head priest. In Unwed, a Dovetail Cove novel. I've read it. It's great. It's a great introduction to the series, but you can't go wrong with any of the other 7 books. I really recommend it, folks. Jason, anything else before we cut this one loose?
Just to mention, there's absolutely no Canadian bacon in my spinach dip recipe. That's really the only thing. If listeners can come away from this half hour or however long we've spoken with one idea, it's that Canadian bacon is fantastic, but it does not go in the spinach dip.
Yeah, that's true. And little known secret about my Canadian friend, he doesn't like maple syrup. He gags on it.
I do. It's just a personal preference, and quite frankly, I'm tired of everybody sending me maple syrup because I'm Canadian. I don't understand.
Yeah, why?
Make fun of my accent. That's fine, but stop sending the maple syrup. Watch, I'm gonna actually get some readers sending me maple syrup or coupons or something.
It's hilarious because you live in the land, that invented it practically, and they're
Yeah, yeah.
sending it to you.
The maple leaf is right there on the flag. I look at it every day. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Oh man, that's
But yeah,
hilarious.
the irony, right? The irony.
It's
I
like
also hate cold weather too. I don't like that. There's that.
that's something else. Well, it's yeah, it'd be like people sending me as an American author, I don't know, hot dogs or something. I mean,
Sure.
no, I can get them here. It's all good.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Well, listen, folks, this has been so fun. Jason, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. 75 times.
It's my
Oh wait,
pleasure.
only chapter 30. I've only been here 30 times.
Yeah, but we'll get to 75, and we'll have you back again soon. Oh, Jason, one last thing. One last thing. What would you consider to be your greatest failure as a writer?
Taking bad advice, probably. Early days, and I don't mean early days of writing, but early days of sharing my work, which is it's kind of like two different birth dates. You know, you have a birth date when you start down the path of creating something, and then you have another birth date where you start sharing it. I started sharing writing that I had done, and I took some bad advice, and some of that advice was to try and hammer it into a genre. Now, that's tricky because genre work sells,
Right.
and work that it cannot be easily labeled does not sell as easily right away. So when I say it was bad advice, I mean it was bad advice for me to take pre-existing work that I had worked really hard on, and it was as I felt it should be, written in the way that it is, mixing, bending genres, pulling in different pieces of genres based on my experience as a reader and what I liked and what I was experienced with and what I thought I could write to tell this particular story, and trying to take some of those influences out. You can't do that without affecting the quality of the story, in my view. And I think I damaged some work and shared it, and it didn't do well, and people didn't get it because it was lesser. It was made lesser by trying to